Today's guest is Diane Taylor, who is the founder and principal consultant of Glow Leadership. She's a speaker, an executive coach with over 30 years of professional experience across several industries. Her first book, Elevate Potential, A Conscious Approach to Success, debuted as a #1 bestseller in hot new releases and management. Diane is passionate about helping leaders discover and ignite their highest potential in their business, their career, and their personal lives. So, Diane, thank you very much for being on. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Drasco, and thank you so much for this opportunity. It's already proving to be very fruitful for me, so I'm excited to join you today.
Absolutely. Listen, I always say it like I love it when, other coaches come on here because it's very much kind of walking your own talk and there's a certain level of vulnerability and courage to do this live on air. So I'm always appreciative when other coaches say yes to do this. So absolutely my pleasure. Yeah, so I think before we kind of get into your coaching and the Peaceful Profits roadmap that you went through, if there's anything contextually you just want to add to, who you are and kind of how you got to doing what you're doing, floor is yours for that, and then we can kind of segue from there.
I think, it sums it up. I'm a leadership coach. I coach and I facilitate hybrid leadership development programs, mainly for corporations. And I absolutely love what I do because I love seeing people reach their highest potential.
Love it. Love it. Very much aligned in regards to how we view this whole thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, in that case, you're always in this spot where you're supporting others. I'm happy to be able to support you today.
Mhm.
So, you had gone through the Peaceful Profits roadmap, which is the whole like a assessment and self-discovery process prior to getting onto here. And I just would love for you to kind of summarize what were your takeaways with regards to that whole process, and then we'll get into the specifics from there.
Yeah. So I thought the process was excellent. I, identified things that um, I've definitely been aware of, but where I didn't have a connection before I did your process was the time and money leaks associated with my um, challenging emotional responses to different things, and how that was directly creating the plateau in my business. And so, over the last week, doing the program, really committing to it, I've found quite a significant transformation. And I feel very empowered and excited about the opportunity that lies ahead for me this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll get to kind of the highlights of what you were able to kind of like the win that you were able to extract from that process. But I think that the first thing that I would just want to dive into is when you did the assessments, right? Your kind of core behavioral pattern that was driving a lot of these profit and time leaks. In my nomenclature, it was like the outlearn pattern. Okay. And I know for you that it didn't manifest as typically as like the other people that have done this assessment, but the part that landed for you was from the perspective of I tend to outsource, my credibility and authority elsewhere, right? And then kind of I lack the self-trust to take that ownership back myself. Okay, so just tell me a little bit more about what you found as a result of those
Yeah, and
actual results.
I don't even think it's a matter of outsourcing my credibility. It's more of that lack of self-worth or self-belief. It's all wrapped up in that for me. It always has been. And then that seeps into, oh, well, if I charge, what other people charge, maybe people won't be with me, or the imposter syndrome of, well, am I good enough? Or, who am I to believe this? And so that goes on in the background and affects, what I charge and how I show up and my, lack of desire to sell, which is completely at a lack of when I'm dealing, like it doesn't make sense when I'm dealing with my clients and we're in a process and it's going so well and they're getting so much out of it and their businesses are growing and thriving as a result of the work I do with them. They're receiving high value. There's a gap between me finding my own value. And so that's kind of how it plays out for me.
Got it. So it's basically around claiming your worthiness and allowing that to showcase and manifest as far as like, okay, well, outwardly, I can just take ownership of this. There's no resistance internally around what this may or may not mean, etc. So like, is that more accurate for you?
Yeah, and I think, my process in 2024 was to write a book so I could be viewed as more credible, right?
Right.
I'm the same person I was before I became a best-selling author. My process working with clients, the results I get, I'm still getting results, but there was something inside of me that felt, oh, I need that extra title, or I need that, credibility builder to grow my business, which I think it is. And it has given me, a new swagger in my step. But if I had just focused on those time leaks and just selling what I do well, I probably could have done that without it.
Correct. And one of the things that is very much aligned with that outlearn pattern that we introduced at the beginning is outsourcing kind of where you get that worthiness from, right? And that's literally captured in what you just mentioned. It's like, yeah, you wrote the book, and obviously the fact that it's a bestseller is great, and you need to use that in your marketing, and it's like a reflection of who you are, and like that all should be celebrated because it's not a small achievement.
Right.
And for you to raise your prices, you could have literally just raised your prices at the beginning. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like you could raise them more now that you have a bestseller, but like I had to spend, 10 months of my life going through that process where I could have done that on month one. What would have been the differences as far as like what I would have experienced, day to day, etc.
Right.
Right. So that's kind of very much coincides with that pattern that always avoids what the real issue is. Okay.
Yeah.
So just kind of curious, what are your, like as I reflect that back to you, kind of what lands for you?
Yeah, and this goes deep with me, right? And this is, what I help people do is understand that it's their emotional, unprocessed emotional wounds that creates impacts to the way they show up, or triggers. And, you know, two of my book is all the impacts of my childhood wound and how I show up. This just is another layer of that, right? The feeling like, if I don't create stability by ensuring that I have a low priced offering, that, or if the imposter syndrome, someone finds out that I'm just really not all that, the rug could be pulled from under me, and I, you know, dismantle my security. You know, I understand where the wounds come from. I understand the impacts of those, and it's still there. There's still room to heal that. Um, in the chart with the rider on the elephant, my elephant's twice as big as your picture.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, just for context, well, what Dan is referring to here is when I describe how the same dynamic you just mentioned, right? Where like I understand the root of this, but it's still like impacting, kind of like my past is sabotaging my present, right? Like, okay, well,
Yeah.
why does that happen? Well, if you look at why those emotions, right, that's like your subconscious essentially speaking to you in some sort of way and directing your behavior in some sort of way.
Yeah.
The way that that actually ends up manifesting is it operates as like this analogy of an elephant and a rider. So the rider ultimately seems to be in charge because like it's guiding the elephant. It can, smack the elephant with a stick to like, okay, go this way, go that way. And for the most part, the elephant says, yeah, cool, like we're gonna go. But as soon as that elephant is like something on this road is like a no-go situation, like there is no amount of like beating you can do that horse or that elephant that's actually going to move it forward because it's so much bigger than you are, right? And then that's the our internal experience of, well, I know where I need to go. I consciously understand what I'm capable of. I have objective evidence that my clients are like loving the thing that I do and they're getting great results. Yet my internal elephant's like, ooh, it's not really safe to add an extra 30% to my pricing, even though it's completely justified. I should take 10 months out of my life and thousands of dollars and write a book. Like that will probably get me there. Like it's like it
Right.
doesn't make logical sense, but it makes perfect emotional sense because you're looking at it from what the root cause is. So I know I'm just kind of elaborating on what you mentioned, but anything you want to add to that, floor is
Yeah.
yours.
And the way I describe it with my clients is that emotion will always out trump thought. And the example that I like to use with them is, you're on the bench with coach and coach says, the game is tight. We can't take any penalties. And everyone goes, yeah, yeah, you're right, coach. That makes sense. And then they go out on the ice and someone, talks their trash to you. And next thing your gloves are off and you're pounding that guy. Emotion always trumps thoughts. So no matter how brilliant of a mind that I may have, and it's easy for me to coach others to, work on their stuff. That emotion or those still lingering, unhealed, unprocessed emotions are still, biting me and holding me back from my true brilliance.
Correct. I would agree. And again, like I know you know a lot of this stuff. I'm actually just explaining it more for the context of the episode. It's very clear even from just your answers that like this is not your first rodeo into, this type of work. So I get it. Okay, and I think it's also a perfect segue into what at least I read as your takeaway from going through this process, which is like, okay, there's clearly something that's still left lingering. There's another layer of healing that needs to happen. Because if it did happen, then I wouldn't like be having these issues. So I just want to make sure, like, is that kind of your takeaway, or is there something else you wanted to add to that?
I think there's always going to be new layers or new lessons. I think what happened for me in this process was very, um, it, it aligned something for me. And in terms of what I've never thought about previously is there's these things. I know there's still triggers, but I'm, working towards being better every day. But when when I took your framework and put it into, here's your lost hours, here's your lost potential, here's your lost revenue, it went bing 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 bing. So that was, very powerful. So in this moment, I don't know if I feel like I need that. I feel quite empowered and ready to, I've developed a strategic plan for the new year. I'm ready to go start executing it.
Okay, perfect. So I'm glad that that is what came up for you. So here are the things that I would reflect back to you, with regards to that, because in some of your answers and like reflections while going through this process, um, there was a lot of stuff that came up around, okay, so I have clearly some self-worth things. I need to work on my self-trust. I gotta kind of prove, that I'm worthy, etc. And even though I see the potential of that, what's left over is to now go and implement it, right? And usually when I go and implement it, right, and this is kind of like your words now, like I tend to get into my head, and then the fear of executing and going into the strategy tends to take over, right? So I need to like work through, heal those things. So just even before I go on, does that resonate with you as far as like those responses might have been shifts? It still resonates. Like where are you at when I reflect that back to you?
Yeah. So I think where, I'm ready to execute what I'm doing with my time savings, discovered in your process, where there will probably be another, challenge with the elephant is when I put it out for the first time and people don't understand how great it is and they don't all sign up right away. And I have to repeat the message. And instead of feeling the rejection, I need to say, oh, people are busy. They didn't read it. They didn't see it. And just repeat to get the leverage. I'm a great creator. I'm a great strategist, but I'm not good at selling.
Okay.
So that's where it could, I'm all energized. But after I send my newsletter with my new offering that I have now, because I went through your fabulous program, if I hear crickets, then I'll be like, oh,
Got it. So in that instance, like you're recognizing that there is now this motivational high after I have some realizations.
mm,
Okay. And I also realize that historically and through my work, after a high, there usually comes a low. And it's within those lows that I tend to have issues. Like they tend
Right,
to be ones that cause me to shrink as opposed to I just continue to push through.
right.
Okay. Okay. So, well, I guess tell me more about that. Like, is that something that you historically have known about yourself? Like, tell me more.
Yeah, I think I would be get stuck in that low instead of understanding, instead of just not experiencing a low and just next continue, share. It's there was no uptake. This isn't working. People don't want this. It was a bad idea. You
So
know,
that's when the inner critic starts to
yeah,
basically shut everything down.
right.
Okay, got it. So I think that's a very important thing to note because the through line with everything that you had mentioned, like when I read your responses, a lot of it had to do with um, this fear showing up, and then I don't really know how to like navigate through the fear, right? I give lots, I charge little. Okay, so there's a fear there of like, what are they going to think if I charge too much? I'm going to fear them saying no, right? Over reliance on other people to validate, fear there. I don't get a response, fear is there, right? I took 10 months to write a book instead of just increasing my prices, right? Had residual good outcomes, but also kind of partly led by fear, right? And there's this big tendency because you have so much self-awareness to go into more healing. Like if the fear is there, then clearly there's something in me, some either belief, some, something that's still not processed
Yeah,
that is creating that fear. So before I go on, like, is that accurate as far as what your
yeah.
experience is like?
When it came down to the fears, one of the fears is fear of failure was one of my highest, right? So
Hmm.
put myself out there, fear of failure, right? And so then it's like, oh, no one responded, no one was interested. And then, which is totally an emotional response when it's like, oh, well, people are busy and they need to see it 12 times before they actually buy. And, they need to see some social proof. And the reality is that. But for me, there's the fear of failure. Oh, this is a failure.
Got it. So this is where I think the real critical point for you here, because I know you also mentioned in your response, like, oh, I'm really curious to see like how do you work with the unconscious and like how do you kind of process this? So I guess the first thing is there's kind of like good news and bad news is in what I'm about to say.
Okay.
Okay. And what I'm about to say is I don't think you need more unconscious work per se. Okay, which
Okay.
kind of like the good news and the bad news because I have this expectation, like I know this is like part of it, but then if I don't need that, then what else is left? Okay, and I'm going to elaborate on that piece.
Okay.
If we zoom out and look at this more broadly, not even specific to you, but fundamentally, right, the currency of moving through fear is always going to be courage.
Right.
Right, which if you remember even in your thing, like that was a big part of like how do you move past this outlearned pattern? Well, the currency of that change is also courage. And courage only exists when the fear is actually present. Otherwise, it's not actually courage, it's something else.
Right.
That is basically a full contact sport, meaning that exposure and the stacking of evidence that who you want to be and who you want to express is fundamentally safe requires that you pay the price of admission, which is going to be courage. Now, this is why I'm saying I would put kind of the unconscious root level work at the bottom of the things that you need to actually work because you're already extremely self-aware. You understand the root of it, you see the patterns already. Like there's not much that I can add that would be life-changing for you from that perspective. What I am getting at is the path forward for you is right now, like your comfort zone is I'm going to do more healing sessions. I'm going to work through beliefs. I'm going to get to the core of that. And you will always find something, like you said. And this is why people oftentimes that have this pattern, and this is mine, so I understand this very intimately with regards to how it can make you spin around. What you end up doing is you end up creating a higher resolution problem. And what I mean by that is if I ask you to draw a house, right? And if all you did was you drew a square with a triangle on top, slapped on some like windows and doors, for most people you show them that, like, yeah, okay, that's a house. It's like a crappy, childhood type of like house. Okay. Now, if I took that same drawing and then I put like projection lines on it and I started like making it 3D and I started shading it, maybe I added a yard, I added like landscape in the back, I've added color, like it would still fundamentally be a house. It would be a much better looking house with so many more details, but it fundamentally doesn't change what it is at the beginning. And if we bring that back to like what the core crux of your block is, because you are so good at spotting patterns, at understanding all these things, you have a breadth of experience and knowledge around understanding yourself. The default place you stay safe in is creating a higher resolution problem. If I just understand my wounding a little bit better, if I just get to another root cause, if I just understand what pops up in this context and why I have fear here, this is going to help me. Okay. And it doesn't mean it's not useful. It's just creating a high resolution house that ultimately you knew a long time ago before. It's just why I'm saying that is at the bottom of what I think you need. That needs to be a supporting role with regards to how you move past these things. So before I go on with like those specifics, what lands with this?
That lands. Um, I definitely think future focused. If I take courage, like my definition of courage is from the French word, my heart rages, right? And if I focus, I know this works for me in the past, is when I put my purpose will always outweigh my fear. And therefore, if I focus on my heart, what my heart rages for is my purpose, helping as many people as possible be reach their highest potential. So
Hmm.
if I future focus instead of the unconscious work of like that I've done a lot of, that makes sense. But there was one thing in your program that really resonated with me was unconscious safety and enthusiasm. I'm like, how do I get that?
Correct. Okay. Before I get to that, because I think it will relate to the other points that I wanted to share with you,
Okay.
this idea of purpose overarching, like superseding fear. Fundamentally, I agree with that, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And you could still achieve that purpose by working for free.
Yeah.
Like you could literally go volunteer your time at all of the organizations, help as many people as possible,
Yeah.
but that's not exactly what you want.
Oh, I would love to do that, but I need the freedom to do that.
Right.
So
Like if you won
if
60
you take
million at the
15,
lottery, I'm sure you would do that.
right,
But like right now, that's not actually what you want.
right,
Like you want to help a lot of people because helping a lot of people in the short to medium term will mean also a lot of financial benefit for you and also helping a lot of people not at the expense of your own energy and well-being.
right.
So, is it really true that your purpose can supersede your fears in that way?
Perhaps not. And there is treasure in the transactions. So what we give away for
There
free
is
is not
also
as
from kind of
transformational.
sorry, go ahead.
Well, just, if I am going and, win the $70 million lottery and giving my services away for free and helping people for free, it's not going to be as transformational for them because
Correct.
know that there is treasure in the transaction, meaning people commit to what they pay a fair price for.
Exactly. Right. So there are layers to why our brains will lie to us with the for lack of a better term, like the moral argument of like, yeah, just go help more people, right? Yeah, absolutely. And what if me helping more people is actually doing a disservice because I'm not engaging them to have buy-in into the transformation that is going to require a lot of their work, right? So
Right.
the only reason that I'm highlighting this before I get to like your original question is like your brain has all of these things that it basically makes very sophisticated lies. And the easiest person to lie to is ourselves, right? And like what you just said sounds beautiful, sounds honorable. Who would want to argue with? I just want to help more people.
Right.
And yet, like that's a beautiful bow that we put on fear because then it just keeps us where we're at. It allows us the evidence to justify
Right.
where we're at. So like I want to help more people is a beautiful North Star, but I want to arrive in that North Star with the courageous, right, unconscious enthusiasm of like, yeah, I own this journey and the value that I brought to getting to that North Star. Okay. So just before I go on, does that all make sense?
That does.
Okay,
Very
perfect.
insightful.
Yeah, okay. So now getting to your question of like, how do you get to this state of enthusiastic unconsciousness, or like, how is it just a natural part of who I am? I can't remember if this was in the Peaceful Profits Roadmap or not, but I always use this example. I've used it on the podcast many times. But if I asked you, are you a thief? What's your response?
No.
Okay. Do you ever have trouble not stealing something when you go to a store?
No.
Okay. Do you have to journal, meditate, do mushroom ceremonies so that you stop yourself from stealing when you go to a store?
No, but I've never done a mushroom ceremony.
Okay, whatever. I'm just
Just
kind of
to
throwing out
clarify.
all the things that people do to get themselves into
Right.
this other state. But forget the motion, but it's like, do you have to
Okay.
meditate or journal every morning to ensure that you don't go stealing
Right.
when you go to a
No.
store? No. Okay. It seems like a ludicrous question. Like, are you a thief? Do you steal? Because it's something that literally never crosses your mind.
Right.
Because fundamentally, who you are is not a thief. So you don't actually have to will yourself to not be a thief because you think, feel, and act in alignment with not stealing all of the time. Okay. That place of I don't even have to think about it, that is that place of enthusiastic, unconscious being because like I get to go and just enjoy myself at a store. Right. Now, if you flip that over to business, if I ask you to double your prices, what's the immediate body reaction that you have?
The stomach feels a little bit uneasy.
Right. Suddenly, I asked to do something that's outside the realm of who I am, double my prices. And now, because I have this fear pop up that's going against my identity, who I fundamentally am, I got to do all this work to basically hype myself up to this state. And if I get there and create long enough evidence that, like, okay, it's actually safe to be here, then at one point, it becomes my normal to like be there. Just like if I asked you, would you do what you do for $5? You'd be like, no, it's ridiculous. Why would I do it for $5? Because it's just so far removed from who I am.
Right.
Okay. So that as far as just like kind of base knowledge, what's landing for you with that? What is it?
I guess it's okay how to get from point A to point B. So when it is, I charge, you know, a third more of what I charge now is my I don't steal set point. How do I get there?
Yeah. So for your particular thing, the thing you have to recognize is number one, your healing right now rests on a bedrock of self-rejection. Okay. And what I mean by that is all of these things that you continue to repeat more so in your assessments than you did like live today, but this idea that like I gotta prove my worthiness. I gotta shift my identity so that I can be worthy of the things that other people have told me I'm actually worthy of. Okay. The fundamental assumption in that is that I actually don't accept who I am right now. because the only reason we chase worthiness, which is logically speaking, it is literally, it just is by the virtue of the fact that we exist. We have added layers on top of it to take us away from that. But the only way through that whole piece is if I'm not rejecting myself, even with regards to where I'm at. Okay. And one example of that for you specifically is that whole idea of I'm constantly creating like those high resolution problems. If I'm continuously searching for where I still need healing, the fundamental assumption in that is I need to heal something that is wounded and broken. Meaning, whatever I finish and I get through, well, it's on a bedrock of me rejecting myself. So the first part is actually shifting, creating a practice around, invoking the courage also to be with yourself fully and not reject it. That is number one. Like
Okay.
the focus has to shift from I gotta heal it so that I don't hate myself versus I already am. And these are just some of the things I have to shed. I know it sounds kind of obvious, but we always look at it from that I'm moving away from an unwanted. So before I go on, what lands with that?
I think I'm already like 3/4 of the way there. I certainly don't hate myself. I am at a position where I do love myself and I am confident in what I have to offer. And I get frustrated when I know that I'm not um, charging enough or charging what other people charge. It's kind of like the last thing that I need to break through. Like I'm so close and I just need to make it happen. I believe that I am worth those, enhanced prices. I've been giving out a lot of free stuff for a long time. Um, I think in terms of where the self identity creation thing is, I've gone into my LinkedIn already and I've gone into my Instagram and changed my title um, because of the way my path is, you know, transforming and what I like to do and what I excel at has leveled up. So I'm ready to, emerge at a higher level. So I'm so close is what I would say.
Perfect. So, A, great awareness, right? So it's not necessarily the deeper foundational stuff. I think I've covered that.
Yeah.
So now you get to basically play in the space of self-esteem,
Right.
right? Because your self-esteem is essentially the judgment you have about yourself,
Right.
as is reflected outwardly into the real world, right? So self-esteem is not something you build primarily through inner work. It is fueled by inner work, but where it is solidified is actually in the outside world. And like I said, in stacking the evidence of who you say you are and the judgment of yourself out in the real world. Okay. So basically, right now, as far as like how do I normalize that identity? Well, the fundamental thing is like your actions don't match your ambitions, right? Like that through and through, everything we described is going to be the core thing. And when your actions don't match your ambitions, well, that then becomes a self-esteem thing. And obviously there's overlap, self-esteem, self-worthiness, right? Like, but that the fundamental difference is like one, we tend to kind of go inwards, where self-esteem is very much outwards. And all the stuff we talked about as far as courage, all of that's going to go into that pillar of self-esteem of living purposefully. This is what I say that I want. I'm owning what it is that I want. I'm going to do the things I need to do because I'm worthy of it. And I'm going to then go and do it, paying the price of courage. Right? Now,
Yeah.
within that, oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah. What's landing for you there?
I am doing it when I'm doing it.
Hmm.
It's when I'm not doing it, when there's the space in between the doing it. When I show up with a client or I'm on the phone to a CEO, I am as bad as you are. I am not afraid to call people out on their shit. I am not afraid to challenge. I am there. But then I think the challenge is I've been working with people and they value me. So I've worked with most of my clients for quite some time,
Hmm.
but I'm still charging them the old Diane that didn't have this stacked evidence. And I do have a truckload of stacked evidence now. But it's not that when I'm doing my work, I'm fully there. I have a high self esteem. People will tell you, right, that I'm not afraid to call them out on their shit. But it's this, okay, what about the rest of the time? Then I get off the call and I'm here by myself and I'm like, oh, I seem to shrink back into that.
Correct. So it's not your self-esteem in the fulfillment of your services. It's your self-esteem in the expression and advertising and attraction and sales of your
Yes.
services.
Yes.
Put a different way, you get paid for your communication. You build a reputation for your skill. So the reputation is not what we're talking about here. You already have that covered in spades. Where your lack lies is the self-esteem and the associations I have with myself to project outward into the world of strangers who I am and the value that I provide is a lot lower than my actual capability and evidence when somebody gives me the permission to be that person,
Exactly.
right? That's like everything we're talking about is talking about zoomed into that. Because if,
Exactly.
if you improve the power behind your communication and own your worth at that stage, that's actually what solves all of the financial goals that you have. It's not actually your fulfillment. You're gonna that like you said, you have evidence that that's what's gonna happen. So this is about your self-esteem, your own power in the areas of visibility, sales, and exposure.
Fear of being seen was one of my things.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And 99% of my clients are by referral and word of mouth.
correct.
That I went out into that scary world and found them myself.
Correct. And that's kind of like what the crux of this is. If you want to stay where you are, you've already mastered that, right?
Yeah.
You can continue to probably generate more referrals. Something will pop up just from the momentum that you've had. So it's like this is kind of the ceiling of this particular strategy that's optimized for essentially hiding at least your power, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
if you want the next level of your business that aligns with the financial resources that you want, the level, like I remember in your thing you mentioned, like, yeah, ultimately I would want like coaches under me that like I get to train and they get to do the fulfillment. Like, cool. That vision requires you to shine brightly, not in the coaching space, but in the visibility space.
Right.
And that's like if you want to look at from the like what's the next layer, yes, that would be now the next layer. Because you've probably not done as much healing here because you haven't needed to. And that's where both the opportunity, the fear, and all of it lies for you.
Yeah. And I think, I've had that journey of, showing up on Instagram and for my book launch, I had to, because my fear of failure drove me to be out there, be seen. And I overcame the, um, oh, you're bothering people by being in their inbox too much. But I was going hard I had the courage to become a number one bestselling author. I was out there, I was being seen, but in my talk was, oh, you're bothering people. And then after I just was like, okay, well, I bothered them now. So I'm going to just like slink away now and get under my cozy blanket and watch some Netflix.
Correct. So basically, you willed your way through that experience.
I did.
And that's where that whole thing you mentioned of like my purpose can't trump my fear. Yes, you can use it in that way where like, okay, well, this is such a big thing that like, forget the inner critic in my voice. I'm just going to push through.
Yeah.
That's fine in short bursts, but it's not the unconscious enthusiasm that I'm talking about. Because each time you have to will yourself through, which is why people burn out doing this.
Right.
because fundamentally, I have not embodied the part of me that is actually aligned and feels safe in I do awesome work. And the more people know it, the more people can be impacted. Like
Right.
that's kind of the pure place
Yeah.
of that. And that's what's available to you when your self-esteem in this area rises to the self-esteem you have in the actual fulfillment. That really is your particular gap.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I guess lands for you, like in your words, from all of that?
Yeah, it's, much more of a constant state. And I know that cycle or that burnout, that's that sprint and then lay exhausted on the field. That's definitely how I felt after my book launch. And then pick yourself up again and go, I do think it needs to be more just it is what it is. I am that. And that just is, a peaceful, innate feeling.
Correct. Right. That's really the vision that you get to like be your North Star in this journey, right? I think it's a beautiful one. So I know we're kind of moving towards time for this container. And like I said, I wish I could solve all those problems, in one simple call, but unfortunately I can't. But just in terms of like additional clarity on, okay, what is the actual issue? Like, does this feel like you've gained that, or is there still something left outstanding for you?
No, I think this is definitely the issue. And I just need more support to, ground into that and make that reality instead of just a simple idea.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that. So if you're kind of clear on what that looks like and if this feels complete for you, um, yeah, you can just move us into a close and kind of let everybody know, who's the best person to find you, where can they find you, kind of floor is yours for all of that.
Sure. So I help emerging leaders and senior leaders kind of work through what I have just shared a lot about myself. I think that there's a saying that we're always just one step ahead of our audience, and my clients say that it's my empathy and insight that really helps them move through things. So if you're a corporation that's looking for leadership development, or a person that's looking for a coaching package, or if you would just like to read my book, Elevate Potential, A Conscious Approach to Success, um, all of these things can be found on my website at glowleadership.com, or follow me on Instagram at glowleadership.
Love it.
Continue my journey.
Absolutely. And
Watch me shine.
yes, exactly, right. Well, listen, Dan, thank you very much for allowing yourself to be seen in this way. Like I said, I always have respect for other coaches when they do this. All of those links we will showcase in the show notes as always. So thank you very much for being on here, and for everybody else listening, we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.